No, you're fine. Just keep going.
Okay. So the choice was to either worship the god or build a new religion out of the fact that their god's head fell off, and they chose the second one. That tells you a little bit of something about the nature of people. If your religion isn't working well, you just adapt, right? Mm-hmm. You adopt different ways to make it suit, and you see it throughout the religious world in so many areas.
Right. Now in today's world, look what some have done to the Bible. Verses that they've left out and ignored to fit their...
Sure, absolutely. So this was an important enough little detail that God wanted it in this writing here to let us know that, look how silly they behaved when I showed my power. The other thing that I think is interesting for us to continue on remembering in this chapter is the fact that did the Hebrews glorify God in their actions? No, they did not glorify God, did they? Did the Philistines glorify God?
No.
Was God glorified in this action?
He glorified himself.
He glorified himself, didn't he? That's the point that I want to bring out, is that when man or woman chooses not to glorify God, God will glorify himself, because God must be glorified. And so if man or woman choose not to do it, he'll do it himself. And that's an important thing for us to remember about the holiness of God. Glorifying God is setting him apart. He's separate, unique, holy, consecrated. All those words that we've used over and over again. And if the people won't do it, he'll do it himself. And so he's showing that here in this particular way. Verse 6, but the hand of the Lord was heavy on the people of Ashdod, and he ravaged them and struck them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. So he ravaged them. It's just another word for he smote them with these tumors. There's two teachings basically on what these tumors are. The first one I'll give you is the traditional one. It's been around the longest. It's a rabbinic tradition. It's kind of the old commentaries you find it. And they believe that these tumors were hemorrhoidal tumors. So great big large boils that occurred. Hemorrhoids. And that's the traditional teaching of what these were. Lately, more currently, in the last, 50, 75 years, the teaching seems to be, and it'll be based on a couple of things that we're going to read about following, is that this could potentially have been the bubonic plague. That's also mentioned in the Septuagint, and it's also mentioned in the Vulgate. That's the Greek version of this and the Latin version of this. They believe that it's the bubonic plague. And so Arnold teaches this as the bubonic plague. My Bible in here teaches it as the bubonic plague. But there are still those who teach it in the old traditional way, which is the hemorrhoidal things. Whatever it was life-threatening.
Oh, I know why. Because when they brought the ark back, they brought it with golden mice and hemorrhoids.
We're going to, well, the word is tumors.
Okay.
But we're going to see that's exactly what they're going to do. And so I don't want to jump ahead to that yet until we actually read about it. But for right now, those are the two main teachings on what they are. Hopefully by the end of today, we're gonna have a better understanding of what it actually is. But it strikes Ashdod, and it strikes the territory that's around Ashdod. An interesting thing to remember about Ashdod, I forgot to tell you early on, is it's where the Anakim actually come from. If you remember the Anakim from Judges, the book of Judges, those are the giants from where we're going to find Goliath comes from, and his brothers and stuff. And so Ashdod is actually the area of that. That's just an interesting little side note there that I meant to throw in. So, number 7. Now, when the men of Ashdod saw how it was, don't you like the way that's phrased? Well, they saw how it was. They said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is harsh toward us and towards Dagon, our God. Well, they got that right. So, you know what we need to do with this magic box that's creating all these problems? We need to get rid of it. We need to push it along down the road. Is that the answer to anything?
No.
Okay, what would have been the correct way to have handled this?
Worship the God of Israel.
Okay, so recognize him for who he was. Recognize the power that he's showing them here, something they can physically see, touch, and it's right there. They could have recognized that. They could have repented. They could have come to the worship of the one true God, turned away from their idol worship, and all would have been right. Right? They chose not to do any of that. Instead, they chose to set up the threshold as something important. And they said, you know what? He's pretty harsh, this God. We're not denying that he exists, but he's pretty harsh, so let's just push him along. Move him on out of the way. Verse 8, therefore they sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel?
You missed a paragraph.
I did? What did I miss?
And they answered, let the ark of God of Israel.
Carried away to God.
I'm in verse 8, and that's verse 9.
Yeah, you were reading 10.
No, shit.
No, it's still
I was
8.
reading 8.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Therefore
They sent and gathered to themselves all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? And they said, let the ark of the God of Israel be carried away to Gath. So they carried the ark of the God of Israel away. So they're carrying this ark away, and now they're just going to send it to another town. Now, look on your map when you get a chance this week. You'll see that Gath is the next one in line for it. Gath is actually where Goliath is from. So while the Anakim come from Ashdod, Goliath is actually from Gath. And so they carried it away to Gath. So it was after they carried it away. By the way, do you think they're doing it the correct way with golden poles? And yeah, I think they're kind of manhandling it, don't you imagine?
Probably, yeah.
Sort of manhandling this away. And so it was that they carried it away, that the hand of the Lord was against the city with a very great destruction. And he struck the men of the city, both small and great, and the tumors broke out on them. So once again, the same sort of thing is happening in Gath that happened in Ashdod. The tumors or the hemorrhoids or the growths that they're talking about came on the men of Gath. If it is the bubonic plague, then what happens is that in about a week's time, the surface of the skin fills up with boils that are filled with a liquid that actually bursts. And it is at that time that usually death comes right after that. It takes about a week to die. It's a horrible thing. How is it spread? Bubonic plague. Rats and fleas and that sort of thing. It's carried. So mice and rats are primarily one of the, and that's important for us to note in our next chapter. And so was the Ark of the Covenant any better in Gath? Was that a wise thing that they chose to do? They're kind of spreading the misery, aren't they? Because everywhere that the Ark of the Covenant goes, the people are being struck with these horrible tumors. Verse 10, therefore, they sent the Ark of God to Ekron. Did they ask the people in Ekron if they wanted it? It doesn't appear that they asked anybody. They just said, okay, this is leaving here. This is going on over to Ekron. And sent it there. So it was that the ark of God came to Ekron. And then the Ekronites cry out and say, oh, they've brought the ark of the God of Israel to us to kill us and our people. So they recognize that everywhere that the ark goes, it's going to be destruction for the people. And they said, we don't want it. So it sets off a panic. Verse 11, so they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the God of Israel and let it go back to its own place, so that it does not kill us and our people. For there was a deadly destruction throughout all of the city. The hand of God was very heavy there. And the men who did not die were stricken with tumors. And the cry of the city went up to heaven. So the same thing happens in Gath. Now, I told you earlier there are 5 major cities of the Philistines. We read about 3 of them. The question comes up, what about the other 2? Did the Ark of the Covenant go there? We're not given any word on that. We know for sure that the 3 of them definitely got hit. In our next chapter, though, it's going to be treated as if all 5 had some interaction with this. So it'll be an interesting way to do that. And so these lords of the Philistines are, there's 5 of them. There's 5 lords for the 5 cities. I think you could call them like mayors or governors. of the city. Ekron is, I wanted to let you know, is where Beelzebub was worshipped, which is where we get our name Beelzebub, of course, the other name for God. And we read about it in 2 Kings, the 1st chapter, that was the temple of Baal Zebub, 2 words. I just thought that was kind of interesting. All right, let's go to chapter 6 and see what happens when the Ark of the Covenant needs to go back to its own people. Do we need to turn off for the reading, Francie?
Did you say that